talk about what is libertarianism. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I'm Jewish, and everyone in Brooklyn, and especially if you're Jewish, we're a lefty, democratic person. I grew up with Bernie Sanders. He and I were on the high school track team together, and my views were roughly the same as his.
But who was faster?
Bernie was faster than me. Bernie was one of the best milers in the city, and I was a mediocre runner. And then we both went to Brooklyn College, and I was still a lefty, socialist, unionist, whatever, all the attributes of the left. And Ayn Rand came to Brooklyn College to lecture when I was a senior, and I came to boo and hiss her because she favored free enterprise, and everyone knew free enterprise was objectionable. It was horrible. I mean, you'd have babies starving in the street if we had capitalism. Everyone knew that, and I was ready to, show her my ire. And I was booing and hissing along with the other 3,000 kids in this big auditorium. And at the end of the session, they announced that they were having a lunch in her honor, and anyone could come, even if you disagreed. And I came there, and there was this big long table, and Ayn Rand was sitting at the head of the table, and Nathaniel Branden, and Leonard Peikoff, and Alan Greenspan, and other Randians. Alan Greenspan later became the head of the Fed, but at that time he was one of her followers also. And I was relegated to the foot of the table. It was a long table, maybe 100 people, 50 on a side. And I sat down to the next person, and I said, this socialism is the way to go, capitalism is evil. And he said, well, I don't really know that much about it, but the people who do are at the other end of the table. So I was a chutzpahnik then, sort of pushy. And I stuck my head between Ein's and Nathan's, and I said, there's a socialist here who wants to debate someone on socialism and capitalism. And they said, who is it? And I said, me. I was a senior in college, so I was maybe 20 years older. And Brandon was maybe 35, and Rand maybe 50 or so. And Brandon was very gentle and very nice with me. He said, I'll come to the other end of the table and talk to you. There's no room here, but we'll go to the other end of the table and we'll talk about it under two conditions. One, you don't let the conversation lapse with this one talk, but we continue until we settle this. And secondly, you read two books that I'll recommend to you. Well, the two books were Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, 1,100 pages of very small type. And the other was Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And I read both books, and I came to his house, and I came to Ayn Rand's house, sometimes with my roommate then, and after that, I was converted. I was now a Randian type, free enterprise, minarchist, because Ayn Rand is a minarchist, and that's how I got in with these people that my parents warned me against, namely libertarians. The way I see libertarianism, the essence of it is the non-aggression principle. Keep your mitts to yourself. Don't grab other people or their property without their permission. I mean, sadomasochism is okay. People can whip each other between consenting adults, but it's with permission. Otherwise, keep your mitts off of other people. Don't grab their persons or their property. So the laws that are justified under libertarianism would be no murder, no rape, no theft, no arson, no kidnapping, no slavery, whatever. And that's it. That's sort of libertarianism in a nutshell. Keep your mitts to yourself. Don't grab other people or their property. And if you ask the next 1,000 people that walk down St. Charles Avenue in front of Audubon Park, would you agree with that? Even the criminals will agree. I mean, they'd be lying, but most people are decent people. They don't rob you. They don't rape you or anything like that. They're decent people. So why are libertarians only 1% or 5% or 10% of the population? Because we're rabid about this, because we take it seriously, because we deduce things from these principles, and we strictly adhere to these principles. So let me give you a few examples. Take the rule against using marijuana. If you use marijuana in this city, they'll put you in jail. Well, did the use of marijuana between consenting adults who bought it from someone and you used it yourself, did that violate the libertarian axiom or the libertarian principle of non-aggression? No. You just smoked something, or you put some stuff in your body. Or take the case of the minimum wage law. I hire somebody for $3 an hour, an adult. I'm not exploiting him. I didn't lie to him. I didn't say anything false. I said, would you like to come and wash my car or whatever for $3 an hour? I could be put in jail for that. And most people would support that. So while most people would agree with the libertarian axiom or the libertarian principle of non-aggression, they don't deduce things from it the way we deduce things from it. Namely, we do it pretty rigidly. We say that the only just law is one that upholds the non-aggression principle, and every other law is illegitimate. So laws against pornography, between consenting adults and prostitution, between consenting adults and drugs, between consenting adults and economic laws like rent control, or Lyft or Uber. I want to drive Lyft or Uber. Dan over here, Daniel drives Uber cars sometimes. And in some cities, it's illegal. And all he's doing is saying, hey, I'll give you a ride somewhere, and you pay me whatever we agree upon. And he can be put in jail for that. So libertarians diverge from everyone else because we consistently adhere to this principle, whereas most people don't consistently adhere to this principle. Now, I would say that there are 4 levels of libertarianism, and the top level of libertarianism is anarcho-capitalism, because anarcho-capitalism really deduces the libertarian axiom or the libertarian principle rigidly, and it says even the government violates it. Because we didn't agree to be bound by the government. I didn't sign any constitution. I didn't agree to be bound by anything, and yet they tax me. And taxes would be a violation of property rights. So the anarcho-capitalist view, I would say, would be the highest level of libertarianism, because it rigidly adheres to this principle. The second one, I would say, is minarchism, or minimal governmentism. This would be the Ayn Rand view, that government has only one responsibility: to protect the person's property of its citizens against initiations of violence, like murder, rape, and theft. And to that end, we only need 3 institutions. One is armies, to keep foreign bad guys off of us, not to go around spreading democracy or spreading imperialism, but just to keep bad guys off of us. So if anyone attacks us or they're on the way, we kick their butt, but we don't go over to other countries and try to run them. The second one would be police. We have to have police to keep local bad guys off of us, because 1 or 2% of people, unhappily, are murderers, rapists, and thieves, and we've got to stop them, and we have police to stop them, not to stop victimless criminals where there are no real victims, like in pornography or prostitution or minimum wage or rent control or Uber or something like that. And the third is to have courts, because sometimes people get into disputes and you need someone to settle it. So I would say that's the second highest level of libertarianism, minarchism. The third highest, and this would be associated with Ron Paul, who I revere, is constitutionalism. Whatever the U.S. Constitution says, it's a pretty good document, not as interpreted by the Supreme Court nowadays, but as originally written, with the Second Amendment and the First Amendment and things like that. And then the fourth level, since I'm such a nice guy, I'm such a big tent libertarian, I would include classical liberals, such as Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek, who sort of agree with the non-aggression principle, but make a lot of exceptions. And I would include maybe Charles Murray here, who wants to have an annual fee or some sort of welfare and negative income tax. But they're pretty good on economic issues, and they want to have freedom in most areas. Let me just close by giving one semi-complex example. What is the libertarian view on labor unions? And again, what I do when I analyze anything is I wear these glasses, and these are the libertarian glasses, and I ask, does the institution that I'm now analyzing, or does the person that I'm now analyzing, does it violate the libertarian non-aggression principle or not? And my analysis of labor unions, which I think is agreed upon by most libertarians, would be, it depends upon what they do. And what labor unions do is 2 things, one of which is legitimate, and one of which is illegitimate. And if they would just limit themselves to the one legitimate thing they do, then we would have no problem with them. But they do this other thing that is illegitimate. So what's the one legitimate thing that they do? It is they amalgamate. If one person goes to the boss and says, look, boss, you're now paying us $12 an hour. I don't know what Ricardo is getting as a baker. Let's say it's $12 an hour, and Ricardo goes into his boss and says, I need 15. The boss says, well, the door is over there. Don't let it hit you on the way out. But if Ricardo goes in and says, look, you've got 500 bakers in this commercial bakery, and we all want a raise from 12 to 15, or whatever the raise is, and if you don't give it to us, we're all going to leave. Well, is that a violation of the libertarian axiom of non-aggression? No. There's no contract. I mean, if there were a contract, that would be different. But there's no contract, or the contract is now over, and they want to leave en masse. They want to leave together. Now, originally, when they started this with the Wobblies and the AFL and the CIO in the early part of the 20th century, unions were put in jail for that, because they were indicted under antitrust laws, they're restraining trade or something like that. But the point is that if you can't quit, you're a slave. Really, the only problem with slavery is you couldn't quit, and also that you were forced into it in the first place. But if you could quit at any time and you weren't forced into it in the first place, then it would just be voluntary sadomasochism. But the key is, if you can't quit, we have this thing called free association. The only interaction between people should be free association. People should not be forced to associate with other people. The rape victim doesn't want to associate with the rapist. A victim of a crime, assault and battery, doesn't want to associate with the assaulter and the batterer. So the union is perfectly legitimate in not wanting to associate with this particular employer, because the employer doesn't want to pay him as much as they want. Okay, so if that's all that unions did, we would have no problem with them. We would say that they are compatible with libertarianism and they shouldn't be put in jail, because libertarianism is just the theory of the proper use of violence. And the only proper use of violence is in defense or in retaliation against an initiation of a criminal, of a real criminal. So what's the second thing that unions do that we don't like? And the second thing that unions do that we don't like is, now Ricardo, bad unionist, what he does is he gets a picket line that surrounds the factory of the bakery, and he won't let trucks out with the bread, and he won't let trucks in with the flour and eggs and other raw materials. And when the employer tries to hire replacement workers for these workers that are no longer with him, they call them scabs and try to beat them up. And when they stop doing that, they get a law passed saying that the employer has to deal with the union. The employer doesn't want to deal with them. He wants to hire these other people. That is a very bad thing. And unions that do that, and unfortunately all of them do that, we would say that they're illegitimate. I once did some research on this, and there was this thing called CLAC, C-L-A-C, Christian Labor Association of Canada. And I did an interview with them, and I said, well, what's your view on scabs? Oh, no, we'll turn the other cheek, we don't use violence. And I said, well, what about labor legislation that forces the employer to deal with you, whether he wants to or not? And, oh, yeah, we favor labor legislation. So even CLAC didn't make the grade. So to summarize, libertarianism in a nutshell is keep your mitts to yourself, don't grab other people or their property. And then what we do is we look at everything. Every institution, every person, every political person, such as Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or also Gary Johnson, and we say, do they adhere to at least one of these four levels of anarcho-capitalism, minarchism, constitutionalism, or classical liberalism? And we analyze them in that way, and we use the insight of libertarianism to analyze public policy and current events. And that would be my 10-minute summary of what libertarianism is.
Can you touch on minimum wage? You brought that up.
Okay, minimum wage. Well, what we said, we had this program where other people would then speak, and then we would have a discussion. Should we have questions now and then go around, or I suppose another 5 or 10 minutes on that, and then we go to that other format?
Right.
Okay, the minimum wage law. So I'll take a few questions if people want, and you're the newcomers, so if you have a question, you'd be happy to start. Minimum wage law, there are two problems with it. Is the tape still running?
Yeah, but I can cut off if you want.
No, keep going. The minimum wage law has got two problems with it. One is a libertarian problem. And the libertarian analysis of it is it or is it not a violation of the principle of libertarianism? And it's hard to see how it is, because it's, in the words of Robert Nozick, it's a capitalist act between consenting adults. The lefties are always saying, you know, anything between consenting adults, and Robert Nozick, bless him, said, how about a capitalist act between consenting adults? So I want to hire Gabriel for $3 an hour, and he's an adult and he agrees. Well, I haven't violated the libertarian principle, so I shouldn't go to jail. And libertarianism is a theory of when I should go to jail or when violence should be used against people. The other part of it is economic, and that's a little bit more complicated. The libertarian is very easy. You know, it's not a violation of the non-aggression principle, period. I get freshman students in my intro classes all the time, and they come in and they love the minimum wage, and they hate price gouging, and they hate free enterprise, you know, free trade, and I have to whine them out of it. I don't like to brag, but when it comes to whining, I'm real good at whining. I whine at my students until they give up their economic illiteracy. And the point of the minimum wage is, if the minimum wage is such a great idea, why be so niggardly? Why just raise it to $15 an hour? Why not raise it to $3,000 an hour? Then we'd all be rich. The point is that the minimum wage is not like a floor on the wages and it keeps raising and wages rise. Rather, it's a barrier over which you have to jump in order to get a job. And the higher it is, the harder it is to jump over. If you say that you have to pay people $15 an hour, suppose somebody's productivity is only $10 an hour. Well, if you hire them, you lose $5 an hour. And you either go broke or you don't hire them. This is why the unemployment rate of black male teenagers is quadruple the rate of white male adults. Whereas before the advent of the minimum wage, the unemployment rate of every group was roughly the same. It's because, for other reasons, black male kids have lower productivity levels than a white male age 50. So therefore, a barrier of 5 or 10 or 15 an hour, the white male can jump over, whereas the black male can't jump over and doesn't get a job, which is very, very bad, because if you can't get a job, you're bored, you get into crime, and you go to jail, and you have disproportionate incarceration rates. So the minimum wage law is a heinous law. It really attacks the poor, and guess who favors it? You'll never guess. Yes, labor unions favor it, because labor unions are in competition with low-skilled workers. And when Ricardo was asking his boss for a raise, his boss was saying, well, you know, I'm going to hire some young kids. It's true they're not that skilled, but what the heck, we'll work with it. And initially, I'm making you the bad guy now, you're the unionist, and what you would do is try to beat them up. The problem with beating them up is that they fight back. So a much more sophisticated way to get rid of them is to have a minimum wage law to price them out of the market. Of course. You know what they do with Uber? The taxi people, they want to say we should have a minimum price of $75 a trip. Namely, they're not trying to help the Uber workers, they're trying to price them out of the market. So that would be my short answer to the minimum wage. Another question or two, and then we'll go with the rest of the program?
So, yeah, let's get into something that's the National Libertarian Party chairman, Nick Sarwark, had a little debate over the weekend with another activist from Arizona named Van Gutierrez relative to Proposition 205 in Arizona, which is basically going to implement recreational marijuana. Nick took the position of, look, if this law, it may not be perfect, but if it keeps people out of cages, using his words, then even though it sets up a tax structure, I'm for it. Because people's freedom comes before the taxes. And otherwise, you know, and Van was saying, well, this might mess up the system that's already in place for those with medical marijuana cards, and it's not perfect. And, you know, Van wanted something that was a more fully principled libertarian type solution. And so where would you fall in that particular position?
That's a very good question. It's a complicated issue.
Yes, it is.
On the one hand, you have something good and you have something bad with it. And I know of people that favor legalization of marijuana on the ground that it'll raise taxes for the government. And I think the proper libertarian view is to favor marijuana legalization in spite of the fact that it'll give more money to the government, because the government doesn't need any more money. A very similar thing came up, and it was very complicated during the Vietnam War, when Milton Friedman was favoring getting rid of the draft. Now, obviously, we libertarians favor getting rid of the draft. But the reason he wanted to favor getting rid of the draft was to make the U.S. military in Vietnam more efficient. And the question is, do we really want the U.S. military in Vietnam to be more efficient? We do if it's a justified war in defense, but it was not really a justified war in defense of the United States, because as Muhammad Ali said, no Vietnamese ever called me the N-word. That's a very famous quote of his. And the point is, the Vietnamese never attacked us, so what the hell are we doing there 10,000 miles away? So we have to agree with Milton Friedman, yes, let's get rid of the draft, but in spite of the fact that it'll make the U.S. military more efficient. There's to be less fragging of officers and stuff like that, of people who resent being in the military. And I would give the same answer to the legalization of marijuana. Yes, we favor it, because to put people in jail for smoking marijuana is per se a violation of their rights. And also we realize that the government will have more money, because now they'll tax it, whereas right now they can't, because it's underground economy. So we favor it in spite of.
So I wanted to make 2 points.
Oh, it's not going to give me any, there's nothing to amplify my voice? Yeah.
All right, we'll get started. Today we have the pleasure of having Mr. Peter Schiff and Mr. Doug Casey here with us. First up this week will be Mr. Peter Schiff. He's a financial analyst, CEO of Euro Pacific's Capital. He's the author of The Real Crash, America's Coming, Bankruptcy, and he's the host of the Peter Schiff. Mr. Peter Schiff.
I don't really do the Peter Schiff show, the radio show anymore. I used to do that 5 days a week, but now I just do a podcast. So I guess you can call it the Peter Schiff podcast. But I do that occasionally on Schiff Radio, the same website that I used to do the daily radio show. But anyway, instead of just talking, I'm going to find out what the people in this room are kind of more interested in hearing me talk about, or I can just answer your questions. But I can either talk to you about, I guess, the U.S. economy, I can talk to you about the financial markets, I can talk to you about gold, I can talk about politics, the U.S. election. I mean, what are you guys more interested in hearing about?
I said, what is Aleppo?
Yeah.
But actually, I said it kind of as a joke.
I think it's probably
a
a branded dog food or something.
But
You know, all Gary Johnson had to say is, can you be a little more specific?
Right.
Because all he says is, what you can do about Aleppo. I go, what, can you be more specific? And then he would have given it away, would have known what it was.
Right.
Because that question came out of left field, because, you know, he wasn't even, they were talking about, you know, this strategy, do you take more votes from Democrats, do you take more votes from Republicans? And then out of left blue, it was like, what are you going to do about Aleppo? You know, I don't know, where did that even come from? It seems like they were just totally setting him up, knowing that, oh, you know, maybe you won't. In fact, the interesting thing, I wish, you know, they asked him, you know, name a foreign leader that you admire. And the answer, well, I don't admire anyone.
Right.
and that's what he's trying to say now, because it made it look like he couldn't even think of a foreign leader. I mean, the other, I guess, what was this, the vice president guy goes, yeah, Merkel. Yeah, who doesn't know who Merkel is? What do you admire about Merkel? But, you know, Angela Merkel. Like, yeah, I know one, you know. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, unfortunately, this really should have been the year for the Libertarian Party. It really should have been. And, you know, this campaign just never really got any traction, you know, starting from the beginning. I didn't go to the convention. They wanted me to go down there and talk, but it was over a holiday weekend. It was like over, what was it, Labor Day, Memorial, what it was. And I just didn't really feel like flying down there. But, and especially, too, when so many people, you ask them these polls, you know, I wish we had a third choice. I wish there was a choice between, you know, Hillary and Trump. And but then the fact that the presidential debates would not let any of the third parties. I think they should have had both of them. Put Jill Stein up there, fine, you know. But and in fact, the debates would have been more substantive if they were up there, because they would have had to talk more about the issues. than just about, their personality flaws or, their emails or, their sexual escapades. But the fact that so many people wanted a third alternative, yet the presidential debate still refused to allow them because they couldn't meet this arbitrary 15%. When, what's his name, who was that? Perot. When Perot ran, he was polling lower than Gary Johnson going into the first debate. It was the debate that catapulted him. And it's not like he even did that good, about it, take my grandmother out in the car, I'm going to get under the trunk, I'm going to fix the debt, and he got a lot of votes. I think just being in the debates legitimizes you. Because I think a lot of other people, when they get a poll and they see these other candidates, they're like, what are these names even doing here? Like, what is it, some kind of, they probably don't even realize that they're actually viable. Because, well, if this was a real candidate, why isn't he in the debate? The debate kind of narrows it. In fact, there wasn't even a question in the debate about third-party candidates, or nobody even brought up their names. So they didn't even want people to realize that there were people that were being excluded. I actually thought Trump should have brought it up, because I think when the third-party candidates are in the race, I think Trump ends up going up a little bit. I think he ends up, because Jill Stein only takes votes from Hillary, right? No, Trump isn't going to lose a vote to Jill Stein. Only Hillary is going to lose votes to Jill Stein. And then Gary Johnson is just kind of pulling, even actually a little bit more from Hillary. Because Trump, this is one interesting thing about it. See, the Trump supporters are much more loyal and much more enthusiastic about Trump, because they actually think that his presidency could make a difference. I mean, they might be right, but maybe they're not. But when Obama ran for office 8 years ago, there was a lot of enthusiasm, because people actually believed that just putting like a black man in office was going to be different. Like, oh, all these white presidents have screwed everything up. Let's just put this black guy in there, especially in the black community. I mean, if you remember some of the interviews that they had, it was, oh, once Obama, my troubles are over. I never have anything to worry about. Right? People actually believed that. They were enthusiastic about it. There's no more enthusiasm. There's no enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. Right? I mean, if things got so much worse for blacks under Obama's administration, what hope do they have in Hillary? I mean, if Obama couldn't do anything, where is Hillary going to succeed where he failed? So there's no enthusiasm for her candidacy. But I think you have a lot of people that actually think that the Trump candidacy could be a game changer, because he's obviously different than anybody else that occupied the White House. And so maybe this has changed. Maybe there's a chance. That's why I think a lot of if you look at some of the consumer confidence numbers, they had been rising. And I think they were rising because a lot of Trump voters were confident. They actually thought that he could make America great again. And now that Trump is falling in the polls, you can see we had the biggest drop in consumer confidence in 11 months, the most recent numbers. I think that has to do with the diminishing prospects of Trump winning. And in fact, if you look at the rallies, Trump talks, and he gets 10, 20,000 people to show up. Hillary Clinton, she couldn't even fill this room. If Hillary was here right now at a rally, you'd have fewer people than this. Right, so there's no enthusiasm there. It's just people are voting. But I think the thing about politics or the election is it really confirms how bad the economy is. That's why Donald Trump won, because there's so many Republicans who understand that the economy is screwed up, and they don't think another typical Republican is going to do anything about it, because they lived through Bush and things were bad under Bush, and then they just continued to get worse under Obama. And the fact that Bernie Sanders, a Jewish socialist, right, from New York, could get so many votes, all over the country. A New York Jew socialist admitted he's a socialist, and he got all these. He would have beat Hillary Clinton if it wasn't for the black vote. The blacks just voted for Hillary just because of Clinton name. But if it wasn't for that, she would have lost. And if those WikiLeaks would have come out about her Wall Street speeches, with the text of those speeches, she'd have lost. But the reason that Bernie was so popular is because the economy is that bad. In fact, I thought one of the interesting WikiLeaks that from Donna Brazil to Podesta that nobody even talks about. And Donna Brazil is one of the big cheerleaders for Obama. Every time like a jobs report comes out, she's tweeting about how great it is. Like, oh, this is a great success. Obama's creating this great economy, we're creating all these jobs. Yet in this private email, she's emailing about how awful things are, how people are telling her that they're miserable, that they have no hope because there's so much despair out there. She says, yes, we're creating jobs, but they suck. right? They're low wage, they're part-time, and meanwhile, half of their income has to go to their rent, and the rents keep going up. So privately, she's just like Hillary Clinton. She has a private position, and she has a public position, which of course shouldn't have been news, because every politician has a private position and a public position. They just don't get caught admitting it. That's the problem is Hillary Clinton got outed because she said it in actual conversation with a lot of people. It wasn't like in private. She was speaking in Goldman Sachs, so there are a lot of people in that room. But I think it was interesting that she realizes how bad the economy is. Everybody, Obama wants to pretend that the U.S. economy has recovered. In fact, when Hillary, in the debates with Trump, she'll say, well, we don't want to go back to the failed policies of the Bush administration. Like Trump is trying to take us back to those failed policies. What do you mean take us back? We never left those failed policies. Those failed policies were continued under Obama. They were just expanded. We just took the same bad policies and just made them worse because we made them bigger. That's all Obama did. I mean, but government grew under Bush, and then it just grew faster under Obama. And the Federal Reserve did the exact same thing under both terms, right? What did the Fed do? Under Bush, they inflated a housing bubble to cover up the bursted dot-com bubble that Bush inherited from Clinton. Well, what did the Fed do under Obama? They created an even bigger bubble to cover up the problems of the housing bubble that burst, when George Bush was leaving. Now, I think the Obama bubble is far bigger than anything that was inflated under Bush. It's just that it looks like this one is not going to burst until after he leaves office. So that is helpful to Hillary Clinton, because that's what helped Obama. What really elected Obama was Bush, because the economy collapsed under Bush, and it was like, okay, we just got to do something different. Right? Anybody probably could have won against Bush.
So when you think that this bubble is going to burst during the Clinton term?
I think Obama's going to get out of Dodge. I mean, there's no guarantee, but there's only a few months left. So the odds of this thing collapsing in the next few months are probably slim.
Do you think it's maybe advantageous that the libertarians may not get elected and get stuck holding the bag?
No, that's not advantageous. It would be great. It would be great if we got elected.
Well, here's the thing. So, hey, you got libertarians in, and then you have a worse collapse outward, and it's like, those libertarians, look what they did.
No, well, the thing is, the best thing that they got going, if they get 5% of the vote, at least they get matching funds 4 years from now. So they're polling over 5% now. So that's one of the reasons to vote for Johnson. Is so that the next guy who runs, which won't be Gary Johnson, this is his last shot, he said. But at least whoever runs in 4 years will have some money. But I think that this bubble is much bigger, because look at all of the air that has been blown into it, right? Because the last bubble, the housing bubble, what did it take to inflate that bubble? It took 1% interest rates. And the Fed left them there for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half. And then it immediately started to raise them back up, only it did a quarter point every time they met, right? Well, what has the Fed done? The Fed went not to 1, the Fed went to 0. And this time, and then they left them there for 6-7 years. And now they finally started to raise rates, and they're not doing a quarter point a meeting, they're doing a quarter point a year. I mean, this is far more slow than what they, in fact, if they raise rates in December, which the jury's still out, I still don't think they're going to do it. But even if they do, that's it, they're done, that's the end of it. And then they're going to start cutting again. They're already preparing that, they're already saying, look, we're going to leave rates low for indefinitely for years and years and years. And we had quantitative easing, we had 3 rounds of QE. I mean, the Fed didn't do any of that to inflate the housing bubble. And so the bubbles are created by all the cheap money. And the cheaper the money is, and the longer, the more mistakes that get made, right? So we have so many more mistakes that have been built into the economy now. The economy is much more screwed up today than it was in 2007, 2008. So when this bubble bursts, the consequences are going to be far more horrific. And I think the Fed understands this, and that's why they're not raising rates. That's why they haven't shrunk the balance sheet. They talked about shrinking the balance sheet years ago. In fact, when Ben Bernanke first did QE1, he went to Congress and he was actually questioned about, hey, you're monetizing the debt. This is not good. And Ben Bernanke said, no, we're not monetizing the debt. What are you talking about? Monetizing the debt is when a central bank becomes a permanent source of funding for the government. We're just buying these bonds temporarily. It's an emergency, and as soon as the emergency's over, we're going to liquidate the bonds. Now, at the time, I said he was lying. I said, that's impossible. There's no way they're going to liquidate these bonds because no one will buy them. I said, once they go in, I said, that's the end of it. They can never stop. And here we are, 7, 8 years later, they haven't sold a single bond. And not only haven't they not sold any bonds, every time they get interest, they reinvest in more bonds. Anytime a bond matures, they just buy another one. And so the Fed is doing this for a reason. They haven't raised interest rates for a reason. They keep talking about raising rates because they have to talk about it, because they can't do it. But by talking about it, they create the illusion or the impression that the economy is actually strong enough for higher rates, but then they don't raise rates and prove that it's not. So this bubble is going to pop. I think what's going to happen is, after the election, assuming that Hillary wins, and again, it's not, look, the polls certainly look like Hillary's going to win, but we'll see. The polls said that they were going to vote against Brexit. So I don't know. I mean, depending on turnout, I mean, people will say who they're going to vote for at a poll, but are Hillary Clinton supporters going to actually get to the poll? I don't know. I think Trump supporters are going to vote. I think they're going to make sure they vote. So I think his people will turn out, not because they get a call from a phone bank, because they actually believe that this is their one shot. They know things are lousy. They have a part-time job or 3 part-time jobs. They have no savings. They're drowning in debt. And this is a guy saying he'll make America great again. Hillary Clinton keeps saying, well, America is great. Well, the voters know it's not. They don't buy that. So we don't know. And there could be, too, a lot of people could be embarrassed to admit they're going to vote for Trump. Because what are you, racist? What are you, sexist? So in private, they might vote for him. And I bet there's a lot of people who actually believe that electing Trump is going to create a disaster, and they want to see it. It's like, okay, things are going to be that bad? Yeah, I mean, it's good entertainment. I mean, Trump was saying to black voters, hey, why don't vote for me? What do you got to lose? Yeah, what do you got to lose? Nothing. I got nothing. So I got nothing to lose. And there are people that just, there are people that just like to see, look, when there was an accident on the road, everybody's looking at an accident. Right? You ever go to the movies and you start rooting for the bad guy? Right? So for a lot of people, it's just theater. It's just entertainment. I mean, the Donald Trump presidency would be much more entertaining to watch than Hillary. I'm sure all the comics are probably going to vote for Trump. So we'll see. But assuming that it's Hillary, and if Hillary wins, I think that right now there's a lot of pressure on the Fed to talk about how great the economy is. Because Hillary is running on, hey, the economy is good now and we want to continue it. So the Fed has to go along with that narrative. And the Fed is very political. And in fact, one way it's political, if you didn't already know, I saw an interview, or listened to an interview with Ben Bernanke on an internet radio show. And this guy goes to Ben Bernanke, and he plays him some clips of Ben Bernanke in 2005, when he's talking about how there's no housing bubble, and everything is great, and anybody who says there's a housing bubble is wrong, and there's nothing to worry about, and the economy is not. I mean, the worst, he couldn't have been more wrong. So the guy plays these clips, and then he says to Ben Bernanke, how do you feel when you listen to these clips now, right, knowing what happened? How do you feel? And then this was his answer. He said, well, I couldn't exactly be honest at the time because, I was speaking as a member of the administration. And I'm like, what? You weren't a member of the administration. You were the chair of the Fed. But in his mind, he was part of the Bush administration. And he admitted that I couldn't exactly say that, everything was going to fall apart. So if he admitted that he was just spinning for Bush, then why wouldn't Yellen be shilling for Obama? Or that's what they're doing. They always want to help re-elect the incumbent. So I think once this election is over, then the Fed no longer has to pretend that everything is great. Because the election's over. Now they can acknowledge, oh, you know what? The economy is not as strong as we thought. Things have happened that we didn't foresee, and it's just an unexpected weakness. We'll blame it on something happening overseas. And then they can start cutting rates again, because they don't want to come to the aid of the economy now because they want to pretend it doesn't need their help. But I think after the election, and of course Hillary Clinton, you got a lot of problems, right? What's going to happen after the election? You've got Obamacare premiums are set to rise by about 25% at the beginning of the year. That's a pretty big number, on top of all the other problems that people have. They're going to have to be spending all that extra money for their insurance. But I mean, and then more, as more of the minimum wage kicks in and more people start losing their jobs, I think there's a lot of people that have several part-time jobs now that they've hobbled together. That's really the secret of Obama job creation. We talk about, failing yet turning that into success. So Obama creates a program, Obamacare, which basically makes it so expensive to hire full-time workers that nobody will, right? So you have all these companies now that used to have full-time workers that now have a completely part-time workforce. Because that's the way you get out of Obamacare, is to have part-time workers instead of full-time workers. But if you're gonna have a business where all you employ are part-time people, by definition, you're gonna have more people, because each one is working fewer hours, so you gotta hire more people. So if I fire a full-time worker and I hire 2 part-time workers to replace them, Obama takes credit for the extra job. Hey, I just created a job. Because, I lost 1, I gained 2, it's a net of 1. Because when they put the jobs numbers out every month, they just report the net. Right? They say how many jobs were created. They don't break it down between full-time jobs lost and part-time jobs gained. And in fact, one of the reasons there's so many jobs is because a lot of people have 2 and 3. Look at the number of people every month of multiple job holders. It keeps going up. And this is from statistics. If you have 3 part-time jobs, but the hours of all 3 add up to a full-time job, they get counted as 3 full-time jobs. That's how the government scores it, even though they're just 3 part-time jobs. So that's why incomes are falling. If you look at what's happened during the Obama recovery, this is the first recovery that's worse than the recession that we recovered from. And the average person did worse in the recovery than he did during the recession. If you look at the decline in average wages, if you look at the increase in household debt and the decline of their net worth. I mean, some people like to make a big deal out of the fact that total household debt has gone down. Yes, because the mortgages have gone. Because home ownership is at like a 60-year low. So people don't have mortgages anymore, but they don't have houses, so they don't have their equity. But if you look at their credit card debt, their student loans have gone off the charts. Look at what's happened to student loans in the last 8 years. Right? And then you've got auto. We have another bubble in the automobile market. Look at auto debt off the charts. All these people leasing and taking out. So we have all this debt, and now prices are starting to rise. So I think what is going to happen in next year is, a lot of the consumer prices that are already on the upswing are going to continue. What's been kind of masking the rising core CPI, apart from the manipulation that goes on to underreported, is that we did have the collapse in the oil price. But now oil prices are back at about $50 a barrel. They started the year about 30. So if we're $50, $60 a barrel in January, we're almost got a doubling of the price of oil. And then the year-over-year numbers are going to start to look up. But I think you're going to start to see inflation coming up. I think the Fed is going to be cutting rates because we're going to be back in recession. And I think the main thing that's been propping us up the last few years is the widespread belief that the Fed's policies actually work. Everybody thinks that it worked. They think the Fed can normalize interest rates, shrink their balance sheet, and that has created a big bid in the dollar. That's created a bid in our bond market, and that's enabled us to go deeper and deeper into debt and grow the bubble bigger and bigger. But I think when the Fed has to give up this pretense of tightening, and they have to acknowledge that we're back in recession, and now they got to cut rates, and now they're going negative. They've already talked about this. They're going to take rates negative. Because if they have to start cutting from 0.5%, normally when there's a recession, they do about 400 basis points of easing. Well, you don't have 400 basis points when you're starting at half a percent. So all you can do is go negative, and they've talked about it. And they're going to do QE4, and they've talked about expanding the QE to buy more stuff, buy more assets, corporate bonds, common stock. But I think when the Fed has to go to stimulus again, I think people are going to finally figure it out. Because if we've just gone through an entire business cycle, we've gone from recession to recovery and back to recession, and the Fed never raised rates, right? If they couldn't raise them this time, how are they going to do it next time? Right? Because the reason they couldn't raise rates is because we had so much debt, we couldn't afford a rate hike. Well, if we couldn't afford a rate hike with a $20 trillion national debt, how are we going to afford it with a $30 trillion debt? If the Fed couldn't shrink a $4.5 billion balance sheet, how are they going to shrink a $6 or $7 or $8 trillion balance sheet? And and coming into this recession as weak as we are, because this recovery has been the weakest recovery in, I think, post-war America, the weakest one, despite the fact that we've had the most stimulus of any recovery. So despite massive amounts of so-called stimulus, this has been the weakest recovery we've ever had. And it's also one of the longest, by the way. They've kept it going. It's, I think, maybe like the third longest already, so it's already on borrowed time. So when we relapse back into recession, maybe in the first year of a Clinton presidency, and then the Fed has to cut and inflation starts running out of control. And of course the Fed was always saying, well, you know, inflation is low, but if it ever gets up to 2%, you know, then we'll do something about it. Well, that's all BS. They're not going to do anything about it. But people think they are. But when inflation gets to 3%, 4%, they don't do anything. Now, they're initially going to talk about higher inflation as a good thing, right? Because they're already saying, like Janet Yellen was just quoted as saying, well, I think we can let the economy run hot for a while. Right? Just the Keynesians like to refer to the economy like it's a car. Like you can just step on the gas and step on the brake. And so if there's a lot of inflation, you got to step on the brake. But now she's saying, well, we can let it run hot. Because what she's doing is laying a foundation for allowing there to be higher inflation. Because they've already convinced everybody that inflation is good, right? That's the new thing. That we need inflation, that price stability is dangerous, and prices have to go up by at least 2%. And now they're going to say, well, they go up 3%, 4%, it's still good. I guess I'm out of time because he's here to kick me off.
Ordinarily, you're not supposed to complain about the audience. But you people are rotten kids. There's plenty of pizza here. Come on, this is a pizza break. Everyone come up and get seconds right first. We've got 2 minutes before we introduce the next speaker.
There he goes.
No, it was the one that you're not hearing.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's right. Are you going this year?
Well, no, but my son was admiring he's the one that told me about it, and I wanted to get
Oh, all right.
He's been over to Hong Kong.
Do you teach English? You're going to teach Chinese. How long are you going to speak it?
What do you think is going to happen over in China?
I still think there's going to be a lot of economic growth there, but it's really fucking right. Same thing. No, I mean, they're not going to let you know. Look, the Chinese are smart about stuff. They don't have to run for office. So they don't have to do stupid things to get elected. If you're already in power, you might as well help the economy. I think
Our next speaker, Mr. Doug Casey. He is an investment advisor. He's the author of the book Priceless Investing. He also posts on newyorker.com, and he is the founder and CEO of Casey Research. Please help me welcome Mr. Casey.
Well, let me start off by saying that I totally agree, and I do mean that sincerely, with everything that my friend Peter said. One exception, I'll multiply it by 2. No, I'll square it. I'll cube it, what he said. Peter was absolutely correct, but he was far too conservative. So what am I going to talk about here? I think
The collapse?
yeah, I like to talk about the collapse. A lot of people think I'm a perma-bear, and that's not true. I can prove to you that I'm a perma-bull, actually, in many ways. Not a perma-bear. But, you know, I like to look at things from a long-term perspective. There are very, very few advantages to being 70 years old, I promise you. But one of them is that it does give you perspective. And it seems to me that Western civilization peaked probably about 1914. And although technology and science have been advancing very rapidly since then, in fact, the advance of science and technology has actually been exponential ever since 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. Ray Kurzweil is quite correct. But it's like filling a stadium full of water, starting with 1 drop. It doubles again. You still don't know that anything is happening. But finally, when you get up to the last few doublings, it's like the Atlantic Ocean appears before your eyes. That's what has happened there. I'm not talking about technology and science. I'm talking about civilization, okay? So, I think Western civilization peaked about 100 years ago. I think the U.S. peaked in the 50s when all of the skyscrapers and 75% of all the vehicles, and all the airplanes in the world, all of them were here. All of the scientific and technological advances of manufacturing, everything was here. And now the U.S. is just another also-ran country by absolutely every parameter that you look at today. Also-ran 10, 12, in most cases, still the biggest. The standard of living of the average American has been going down since the early 70s, although it's been disguised and helped by these huge advances in technology. The thing is that technology and science have been advancing rapidly, but ethics and culture has not. They've been stable, or you can argue actually going downhill. And I think that's going to accelerate too. Talking about the economy for a moment, I think in the context of what I've just said about the long term and civilization and so forth, what I like to say is this regarding the current economy. We entered a gigantic financial hurricane in 2007 and went through the leading edge of the hurricane in 8 and 9. And you may or may not remember, it was scary. And then, not just the US, but the Europeans, the Chinese, the Japanese, and all these little nothing nowhere countries all created trillions of new currency units and threw it on the hurricane like sailors throw oil on the waters. And now, as we speak, we're going into the trailing edge of the hurricane. And it's going to be much worse, and much longer lasting, and much different than what you may remember from 2008 and 2009. So I think it's going to be really something. It's going to be, in my opinion, it has the same causes, but it's going to be much worse than the unpleasantness of 1929 to 1946. So you guys are in for a real thrill. But hey, I like thrills. I got a question for you. What the hell are you doing in college? I'm serious. If I'd have good counsel, and I have no counsel at all about these things, when I went to college, I happened to misallocate 4 years of time and a bunch of money at Georgetown University. But if I'd had intelligent counsel when I was getting out of high school, I wouldn't have gone to college. That's 4 years of very valuable time when you can do things from many points of view that are impossible. Well, nothing's impossible at any time, but much harder to do in your 50s or 40s or 30s, or even for that matter, in your 20s. So I think you guys are prudent here, taking a class from Walter Block on something of a genius, and you're getting good ideas. But in all your other classes, certainly if you're taking English and history, and there's probably a gender studies person here for all I know. You're actively wasting your time, and worse, you're having your mind cluttered with all kinds of rubbish that you're going to have to unclutter later on. And we were just talking, before I was talking with one of you guys, and it costs about 50 G's a year to go to school here. Well, okay, some of you are getting scholarships and all this type of thing. Okay, that's great. That's kind of cutting your losses a little bit. But you're not going to get the time back. So I would quit. If I'd had good counsel, I would have gone to Georgetown. Waste of time. What would I have done? Or could I have done? Let me give you an example. After I got out of Georgetown, I was a salesman for a few years. Good occupation for you all to get into. It's better than getting a PhD in psychology by sitting there and listening to some professor yap about Freud. Become a salesman, you learn much more about these things. So I was in Washington, D.C., and I met a guy named Yehuda Ben Yehuda, Israeli citizen who was living in the U.S. And we liked each other. And, we just spent the day rapping. It was wonderful. I felt very privileged. This is a smart guy. And he said to me, Mr. Casey, if you want to make a lot of money, what you should do is go to the Gold Coast, which is what they call Ghana now. And Ghana, they used to call Ghana the Gold Coast. And he said, if you spend 5 years there and are diligent, you'll have 5% of everything going into the country and 5% of everything going out of the country at the end of that time. Well, if I'd met Mr. Ben Yehuda when I was a senior in high school, my whole life would have been different. Certainly would have been an adventure, better. So you guys can do that. And why? What do I do for a living? How do I make my living? Well, I've got a publishing company, and it's doing well. But basically, I've got a lot of money. Peter's got a lot of money, too. We both have a lot of money. And what I do is I speculate in the markets. And one thing I've found about speculating is that you never want to be on a level playing field. What is this bullshit that we want a level playing field? No, I don't want a level playing field. I want a playing field tilted like that, so I can get on the right side of it. Now, you're not going to have that kind of playing field here in the U.S. You've got the same education, the background, the thought patterns, the connections, money, with millions of other people in your cohort. So what are you doing here? You have no marginal advantage. That's insane. What you should do is go where nobody else goes. Now, I like Africa, because nobody goes there. Yes, I know. They go on a safari in South Africa or Kenya. That's Disneyland. There's like 54 countries in Africa, most of them south of the Sahara. And you go there, and you will be unique. The things you know, have done, connections, money, everything will make you unique. You can be sitting down with the president of almost any country in Black Africa in 2 weeks of getting off the plane. And if you're clever, just remember what I told you that Ben Yehuda said to me. And he was right. So, turn in your credentials here and do something productive. I'm not kidding. You can always come back here later if you still want to. You'll have more fun. You'll meet more people in the opposite sex. You'll drink more. Believe me, it's the right choice.
In college?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, you don't have
a drug for the college.
Well, I'm just telling you my own experience. You know, maybe you want to start off in Russia if you want to really drink a lot. But I believe that the environment that you guys are going to be facing is going to be, it's going to be very exciting. In fact, anytime you listen to the news for the next couple of years, just turn off the audio and put on the Rolling Stones Street Fighting Man as background music, because that'll get you wound up for what's likely to be going on. I mean, I'm not going to say that the U.S. is on the edge of a civil war, and it won't be, I don't think, like what the unpleasantness of 1861 to 65, which incidentally was not a civil war, it was a war of secession, which was very different. But I've never seen such antagonistic, no, that's not the word, it's way beyond antagonism, active hatred on a visceral level as I've seen for this election. And I find it interesting. I mean, well, we're not going to have a civil war, mainly because the average American is so degraded. I mean, half of them are receiving government benefits, and 30% of them are clinically obese, and 25% of them don't have a job when you look at the actual numbers, and another 25% of them are on some type of psychiatric medication. So no, these are a bunch of whip dogs and pussies. You're not going to have a civil war, but you could. The situations like, and when the economy goes back into the storm, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I'll be watching from my estancia in Argentina on a widescreen TV with my maid serving me coffee. But I'm not going to be looking at that out my front window. Forget about it. So that's kind of the big picture and the big environment. Incidentally, I think Trump is going to win. Not just by a little, but by a landslide. Unless, of course, Hillary somehow, has had her Confederates jiggle the software and the voting machines and all this type of thing. But I don't care which one of those two win. The other half of the country is going to be really pissed off. So, it's going to be fascinating to watch. But I think Trump is actually going to win for basically the reasons that Peter said. I'll give you another reason. Most people don't think about, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, that everybody knows, certainly the Bernie people, know that Hillary stole the nomination from Bernie. It's a fact. She did, a couple of different ways. And those Bernieistas are pissed off. And they're not going to vote for Hillary. That's half of the Democratic electorate. You're just going to stay at home. The ones that are really pissed off, they're probably going to vote for Trump. So no, in fact, I told my wife, who told me that there's a bookmaker in Australia offering 5.5 to 1 odds. So I'm calling my lawyer in New Zealand and having him put $1,000 down on Trump. Because I can use an extra $5,000. So anyway, that's what that is. I know. In order to encourage you to do something different than what you're doing now, wasting the best years of your life, well, okay, maybe not wasting, but misallocating. I mean, when I was at Georgetown, because you're right, Peter, we all drank a lot, half the time I would cut class the next day. And then if I went to class, I'd usually fall asleep. And if I didn't fall asleep, my notes would be sketchy, and I'd be daydreaming, and then I wouldn't read my notes. So maybe I remember maybe 1 or 2 things from each class I took. That was very expensive. Those little tidbits of anecdotal knowledge. So if you go to college, or if you decide to come back to college, don't take some soft science or history or economics or English or anything like that. Take hard science, so chemistry, physics, engineering, medicine, those kind of things. Those things have real value.
It interferes with your drinking.
There's a lot of chemistry involved.
Yeah, but you know, drinking is just a stage you go through. I don't drink that much anymore. In fact, I don't do, as you get older, you're gonna find it's good to have lots of money. Command of the material universe. But interestingly, as you get older, at least I find this, it becomes less important. I mean, it's actually unseemly to see these people that are in their 50s and 60s, you know, still trying to acquire more physical shit. To what purpose? I mean, it's crazy. It's one of the few things that Warren Buffett has said outside of the investment sphere, where he's almost always right. He said, I don't need $50 billion, but he doesn't want anybody else to have $50 billion. So he's idiotically going to give it away. And incidentally, I got to say, charity is the worst thing you can do with your money if you get any of it. All you're doing is cementing, you're corrupting the people you give it to, cementing them to the bottom of society. It'll be an NGO that manages the money. And they're going to do something stupid and counterproductive, not just counterproductive with it. So that's a different speech to talk
So
about.
what should you use your money for?
Well, let's think about it. You got to do something with your money if you have more than you need. Okay, let's say you're going to die. Now, what are you going to do with it? I would allocate it to somebody who I think is worthy. Give it to them, lend it to them. Actually, if Buffett was really a philanthropist, which he's not, just because you give money away doesn't mean you love other men, which is what a philosopher. What he'd do is continue compounding it at 20% per year infinitely. Why? Because that's creating capital, and humanity needs capital to advance. When he gives it away to all these poor people, it's dissipated. So the whole world's poorer. Just keep compounding it, and the whole world is going to be richer. I know that sounds like trickle down, and I hate Reagan, but still, it was true. It was true. I know one thing I've got to say. If you need some impetus to pursue what I'm basically telling you guys as students, I want you to go on Amazon and pick up a copy of my first novel, which is called Speculator. It's like a Jack Reacher novel, except for intellectuals, okay? Libertarian intellectuals. Most libertarian intellectuals, unfortunately, live in their mother's basement. Well,
Spend their time in the basement.
yeah, exactly. But pick up a copy of Speculator. I promise you, you're going to like it, and it may help change your life. If I'd read my own book when I was in high school, it would have changed my life. And then look out for the second novel in the septet next year, which is Drug Lord, where our hero becomes a drug lord, then he becomes an assassin, and it ramps up from there. So we started early on this stuff. Then he becomes a terrorist, then he becomes a warlord. And I don't want to tell you what comes after that.
President?
Politician.
No, that's disgusting. No, but not religious. Thank you very much. That's all I got to say.
Andrew Mellon and Ray.
What's that?
Are you more comfortable with Andrew Mellon and Ray?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so that's really good kind of start.
So we'll now open up the floor for some time for questions for Mr. Schiff and Mr. Casey. So,
I just wanted to know what Mr. Schiff thought about the Affordable Care Act as far as its prospects
Yep.
with the premium increases coming on and people's.
Yeah, look, the whole thing is a perfect example of how government works, because first of all, government was a problem in healthcare, right? The reason that healthcare was so expensive was because of government involvement. Whenever government gets involved in something, whether it's education, whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare, the price always goes up. Before the government got involved with Medicare and Medicaid, people didn't have any problem. Doctors weren't expensive. I mean, my dad tells me, he grew up in a relatively poor family, 8 kids. His father was a carpenter. But when he got sick, his mother picked up the phone. The doctor showed up, came right to the house. I think nobody had a problem. Everybody got medical care, And my father sold insurance. He had his insurance agency in the 60s, and he had a major medical policy. And it was like $2 a month. That's all it cost. And I think he said that the cap, though, the most it would ever pay was like $5,000. And he said in all the years he had his practice, nobody ever hit the max. I mean, no matter what happened to you, no matter what, you couldn't even spend that much money. You know, you're in a hospital for a month. And of course, a lot of things, you know, if you got pregnant, you know, you just paid for it. Childbirth wasn't expensive. Government got involved in all this stuff and started subsidizing it and encouraging insurance, and then you had these moral hazards and third-party payers and all this kind of stuff. And so instead of recognizing that the problem was government, they said, oh, the solution is let's have even more government. Right? And they always say, well, why is health care more expensive? They'll say, well, because it's more sophisticated, right? It's better. Well, wait a minute. Computers get better every year. Why don't they get more expensive? No, they always get cheaper. I mean, the free market makes stuff better and cheaper at the same time. Healthcare should be cheaper. I look at education. Can you imagine, why is it more expensive now to educate people when we have the internet? I mean, before you used to have a library. You don't even need books anymore. I mean, you can have one teacher. Education should be cheaper now than it was 50 years ago. Everything should be cheaper. They didn't even have photocopy machines back then. They had to do everything by hand. They had nothing. How could it be more expensive? It's all because of government. So government comes in, they create this ridiculous system, which now, you know, because, and here's the worst part about Obamacare, or this whole, the whole idea is that, oh, we can't have insurance companies discriminate based on pre-existing conditions. Why not? They have to. Otherwise, it's not insurance. You can't buy fire insurance after your house burns down, right? That's a pre-existing condition. My house burned down. Well, why can't I get fire insurance? Well, you can't buy it after the fact. You can only buy insurance for something that's probably not going to happen. Because why would an insurance company want to sell you a policy when they're going to have to pay? The reason the insurance company sells you fire insurance is because they know your house is probably not going to burn down. That's why they want to sell the policy. But obviously, if enough people buy it, somebody's house is going to burn down. So the whole idea that you can eliminate pre-existing conditions is nonsense from the beginning. You can't do that. And the reason that they said, well, people lose their insurance when they lose their job. Well, whose damn fault is that? It's the government that did that through the tax code. Nobody gets their automobile insurance from their employer. Nobody gets their life insurance from their employer, or their you know, insurance. Well, why do you get your health insurance through your employer? The government did that through the tax code. So now when you lose your job, you lose your insurance. That's part of the pre-existing condition. If somebody develops a condition and then they lose their job. So what we really need to do is get government completely out of health care. You know, let people buy their own health care. Stop, you know, turning employers into, you know, health care providers so they can concentrate on, you know, growing their businesses and not, you know, providing health care. Well, why should you apply health care? Just because you hire somebody. And of course, I predicted as soon as they passed this that it was going to be a disaster. Because what happened is once they tell people that you can buy insurance after you get sick, well, now no one needs it anymore. No one's going to buy it. The only people that buy are the people who are already sick. That's why the insurance companies are losing a fortune. The premiums are skyrocketing because the healthy people aren't paying in, and the insurance companies have to keep paying out to the sick people who buy the policies. And in fact, the Supreme Court even knew that it wasn't going to work, and this was an irony, and I pointed this out when the Supreme Court handed down the decision. So the government challenged, or there was a challenge to Obamacare. They said, look, this is unconstitutional because you can't have a penalty for not doing something. The government can't put a tax on, or a penalty for not buying insurance. And the Supreme Court said, look, the penalty is so low, it doesn't compel your behavior. They said if it was higher, then it would be unconstitutional. But because because the penalty is so low, and it doesn't actually force anybody to do anything, because you just pay the, you know, such a low thing, they said that it was constitutional. I thought it was a bad decision, but at least it showed the court knew that it wasn't going to work. Because it's much cheaper to pay the small penalty than to buy the overpriced insurance that you don't even need, because just wait till you get sick. You know, why would somebody in their 20s buy insurance for no reason? Right? So the whole thing was going to fail. It's blowing up. Its costs are skyrocketing. But maybe what the plan was, look, we're going to do this so we can create even more problems. And now the solution is single payer, right? Because they couldn't have gone directly to socialized medicine from where so they had to screw it up even more and then go to socialized medicine. So it's like the camel's nose under the tent. The government keeps screwing up the economy and then saying, oh, we can fix it with more government. And then they screw it up again, and then they finally can go all in and say, well, this proves capitalism totally doesn't work. And so now we have to have, social, single payer, and that's where we're headed, because nobody can survive in this industry.
But Peter, I think you touched on it.
Wait a second, we have a moderator.
Questions?
Mr. Schiff, I would like your opinion on a question that I had for a long time. Why isn't Austrian school economics more popular in the financial industry? I know why government likes bad economics, but why isn't Austrian school economics popular in banks and such?
Well, think about it, right? I mean, first of all these guys, one of the most lucrative things that Wall Street does is underwrite government bonds, right? And so they like cheap money, and they like to be embedded with government because it's free money when you can, buy these bonds and sell them to the Fed. Because the Fed can't buy bonds directly; they have to buy them in the market. They have to go through a dealer. But they have a tight relationship with government. Everybody wants special favors, so you want to have your economists that are going to be philosophically in line with the government that you're lobbying. A lot of these guys go from Wall Street to Harvard to government. They stay in this circle, and so in order to be in that circle, you have to be in that club. But Wall Street likes cheap money. They want it. Why should you actually have to earn it if you can just get it for nothing? And they want asset bubbles. They want rising stock prices. They don't care about the underlying economy. So all this serves their purposes. Just like politicians believe in Keynesianism because it gets them votes. It allows them to be Santa Claus because it validates what they're doing. Oh, the economy is weak. Oh, we've got to give out money, right? And the academics. So there is no real incentive. Anybody who's really an Austrian is like an outcast. You're not welcome anywhere. You're not in the club. They don't want you on Wall Street. They don't want you in government. They don't want you in the Ivy League schools. You gotta go over here. Right? But
Professor Ball?
The format of this is that each of our panelists gets a shot at every question. So Doug, do you want to pipe in on either?
No, I absolutely agree with everything Peter said, except he doesn't go far enough.
Go a little further.
You're talking about, the medical system. Sure, the government shouldn't have anything to do with it. They screwed it up. But the government shouldn't have anything to do with anything. As an anarchist, I don't believe the government. When you argue these things, you cannot play on the enemy's field. You have to challenge the premises that the government itself is evil and doesn't have a right to exist. It serves no useful purpose. So that's all I got to say.
Well, I would say though the only reason to have a government is to prevent the worst from arising to take its place. You got to have some minimal limited government just to prevent a worse government from filling the vacuum. Because anarchy really can't exist because I think a government is always going to happen. It's impossible to stop it. So you have to preempt it by creating one. But the key is to try to create a government and minimize its power. And nobody has really been able to do that for any length of time. That's the problem.
Well, I understand that argument, but I'd like to try it. We'll just see what happens.
Well, it's got to be better than what we got.
Yes.
Can I just say one more detail question? Sorry, I might not have expressed myself well, but I don't mean big banks which have big relationships with the Federal Reserve and such. But when I say why isn't Austrian School of Economics more popular in finance, I mean the small funds managers and the independent companies who have to deal with resource allocation and economic forecasting and this kind of things.
There are some hedge fund guys who are Austrians. There are some guys who are libertarians and Ayn Rand type people. They're there, but they're just in the fringes. They're not. Some of them are very successful. There are some very wealthy, very successful people that are Austrian. There are people in the investment business. I get people who are brokers and people who follow me, who listen to me, who email me. So they're there. And some of them don't necessarily want to speak up, but they're behind the scenes. But it's obviously doesn't dominate the culture,
No, that's quite accurate.
So what would you advise a college freshman or high school senior to do if he actually wants to follow in your footsteps?
Oh, Doug already told you.
Well, you two gentlemen are very intelligent and insightful, and you always give these very big and general suggestions. But how do you follow up with those plans? What sort of
I mean-
skills should you develop?
It depends on what you're interested in, but I think today you have so much information in your cell phone. You can access information that 20 years ago you couldn't get unless you went to a university. So you can find what you're interested in and learn what you need to learn without a teacher, without a university, without paying a lot of money. You can be more effective in what you're learning, and you can but. And it's unfortunate that there isn't more opportunity here, because I always thought a young guy, if I was 18 years old, I could just go to a company that normally hires college grads and say, look, they don't know any more than I do. I'll work for half the price. What do you want me to do? Or work for free for a year. And then, because you can gain, I think, work experience. If you work, even if you work for nothing for a few years, that's better than going into debt in college, because then after a few years, you have real work experience. What does somebody with a college degree have? Nothing. Because everybody has the same worthless degree. And I'd rather, if I was hiring somebody who's 22, 23, what'd you do the last 4 years? I went to college, versus I had this internship, here's where I worked. I'd rather have the guy with work experience than drinking experience.
Previously, I attacked the audience for not eating pizza. Now I'm going to attack the two speakers, so I'll be an equal opportunity attacker of everybody. I have two criticisms of you two gentlemen. One of the statist. We do have anarchy right now between countries. The relationship of Canada and Chile is one of anarchy in the sense that there's no government above them. The relationship of the US and Burundi is one of anarchy. So if you're really against anarchy, you have to favor, logically, world government, and most people don't favor world government. So that would be one argument against you. And now I'd like to criticize both of you on this bashing of college. I appreciate what Doug said about me as being a good teacher, and I appreciate that. My colleague Leo over here is also a devoted free market economist, as is my colleague Bill Barnett, as is my colleague John Levendis, and we have another 4 or 5 free market professors here, Bruning and Viator in the law school, and my colleague here, Nick Capaldi, who teaches business ethics. Now, I realize that this is a unique situation where there are 2 or 3 others in addition. We have almost 10 professors out of about 300, which means we have a majority of the intellectual firepower. The only reason you guys are invited here is because we have a free enterprise economics club, and we have a libertarian club as well. I imagine most universities would not invite the likes of you because you're too free enterprise, so you're biting the hand that feeds you. Look, right now,
I spoke at Yale at Harvard, so I bet.
well, touche. I've been there myself, but that's another issue. I guess they want some skunk at the garden party. We're a bunch of skunks. Paul Krugman writes every day in the New York Times garbage. But he has a Nobel Prize in economics, and what I am trying to do, and I speak for my colleagues also, is trying to train the next generation of people who can take on the next generation of Paul Krugmans. If you don't have a PhD, and only those guys have PhDs, then we're in a worse position than if some of us also have PhDs. So a lot of my former students at undergraduates went off and got a PhD, and I've got about 8 or 10 out there who are former students of mine who are now teaching at various universities and running free enterprise. Now, there are many ways to promote liberty. One of the ways is the Libertarian Party. Another way is Donald Trump, vis-a-vis Hillary, the horrible Hillary. Another way is the Free State Project. Another way, everyone goes to New Hampshire, which is some benefit. Another way is you guys promoting liberty in the way you do it. And I think that I believe with Uncle Mao, let 1,000 flowers bloom. There are many ways toward liberty, and one of the ways is through college.
Well, I'm not saying that college isn't right for some people. It's just that far too many people go.
Well,
And a lot of people are steered there
Well, I
based on
agree.
the idea that if you don't go to college, you'll never succeed.
Well, I agree with you that
Yeah.
there's too much of it, and I also agree that if you take a course in feminist studies or literature or any of that stuff, and I agree with Doug that, you know, the STEM issues, physics, mathematics, chemistry are also good. Say that economics is also important as a way of promoting liberty. So I appreciate you coming here. I wouldn't have invited you for the second or third time if I didn't appreciate you, but I did feel that I had to make a claim that, you know, we're doing something good also. Not that everyone should go to college and get a PhD and become another college professor and promote liberty that way, but some people have to do that.
Yes,
Otherwise,
no,
we lose the intellectual battle.
No, that is correct. I'm not trying to say that it isn't right for some people. We need professors. We need people. We need people to teach our children, and we need, you know. But we have now. I mean, I don't know how many people saw my. I was in the New Orleans conference 4 years ago, and I went out and I did a interview. I went up around Bourbon Street. And if you haven't seen it, go on in YouTube, Peter Schiff College. And I went up Bourbon Street, and I just talked to everybody who I could find, who was, you know, a busboy, a barker, bouncer, you know, stripper, you know, whoever, you know, pedicab driver. And I said, you know, did you go to college? Yes, I did. What was your major? When did you graduate? How much do you owe? Everybody I talked to, doing all manner of menial jobs, went to college and had a degree. And, you know, none of I mean, what were they doing with the degree? Nothing. They were doing what they could have done straight out of high school. In fact, they didn't even need to go to high school. They could have done it out of junior high school, right? But the point was, you know, we had all these people, everybody, going to college, getting into debt, and then the politicians want to make a big deal about how many Americans have college degrees. Who cares if they don't learn anything and if they don't mean anything? You see, a college degree would be far more valuable if fewer people had it. Right? And then a college degree would mean something, right? And yes, we want some people going to college, but if everybody goes to college, then what good is it if you got a degree? I mean, at one point, a high school degree was a big deal. Graduating from high school, oh, you made it, you graduated, you're a high school graduate. That was something. Now that's nothing. Everybody graduates high school. Whether you can read or not, you're going to graduate. And then they send them to college. You know, they have remedial math. I bet they have remedial English. I mean, if you haven't mastered math, basic arithmetic, by the time you're in college, what are you doing in college? Obviously, you need to do something else. Academics is not your thing. But, you know, it doesn't matter. So, no, everybody has to go to college, no matter how dumb they are, they still have to go. Why? You know? So that's all my only point. It's just, and that's all government. If it wasn't for government and all these subsidies and government getting, you know, the word education is not in the Constitution, it's not in the bill. The word school is not in the Constitution, it's not in the Bill of Rights, it's nowhere. If the Founding Fathers thought it was so important, why isn't it there? In fact, they thought it was so important, that's why it's not there, because they didn't want the government to be involved in it.
Mr. Casey?
I agree.
One more question.
For Mr. Schiff, you're saying there's an even bigger bubble out there now, and I guess I've probably heard you say that it's more like in the dollar itself, or is there some other particular sector where you're saying it's looking bubbly? And I also wonder, how can you tell the difference between the situation where we have some big sort of bubble in the stock market or in the dollar versus like Japan, where it seems like they're trying to blow up a bubble forever and it's just kind of stagnant, nobody wants to invest, and we could be in that situation as opposed to a big bubble situation. How do you tell the difference?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest bubble is in the bond market, and it's global. It's not just the United States. I mean, bond prices are too high, interest rates are too low. In fact, in some countries, they're negative, which makes no sense whatsoever because there's a time value of money, and it's worth more today than it is in the future, but negative rates flips that upside down. But the bond bubble basically is the foundation for all the other bubbles because it's artificially low interest rates that are the reason that asset prices are inflated. Stock prices, real estate prices, it's all because interest rates are so low that these other prices are so high because you always discount the you know, what's the stock worth? It's the present value of its future income. But you discount it by the interest rate. And so these low interest rates are skewing everything. And then of course, with money being debased, I mean, people want to buy, you know, art, they want to buy collectibles, rare cars, I mean, you name it. I mean, anything everything is going up in price, except maybe the one asset you think would be going up is gold, but like gold is actually going down relative to a lot of these other assets because people are just not choosing it, they're choosing these other assets to hide out in. But there's also a bubble in the dollar in that, you know, the dollar is overvalued versus other currencies, and that's about perception. But I do think that the dollar is going to be the first one to ultimately crack, because the way the Federal Reserve maintains the bond bubble is by creating dollars, because the Fed maintains low interest rates by buying up bonds. And to the extent that there are private buyers or foreign central banks that'll do their dirty work, then they don't have to do it. But to the extent that foreign central banks back away, to the extent that private speculators no longer want to gamble on treasuries, then the Fed will be the buyer of last resort, because the Fed can't let interest rates go up, because then everything collapses. Then the government has to default on its bonds, all the big banks fail, you know, depositors, everything collapses if interest rates go up. That's why they're at zero. And so I think in order to prop up all these other bubbles and prevent them from deflating, they will sacrifice the dollar, and then the dollar will crack first, but ultimately that will bring down the bond bubble and the rest of it. They can't maintain it indefinitely. Of course, the best thing that the Fed can do is let the bubble prick, because that's, the sooner we prick the bubble, the sooner we can start digging our way out of this hole. All we're doing now is digging it deeper, but a lot of it is just political, because nobody wants to acknowledge the problem or what needs to be done to solve it, so they want to keep the bubble going for as long as they can.
Yeah, it's creating huge distortions and misallocations of capital in the marketplace. And when those things come to an end, it's going to result in bankruptcies and lots of unemployment and so forth. But it's even worse than that, because when you keep interest rates artificially low, it discourages people from saving. Now, why is that important? The only way that you can get wealthy as a society or as an individual is by producing more than you consume and saving the difference. But when you have negative or zero interest rates, certainly in real terms, forget about nominal terms, it discourages people from saving and it encourages them to consume. So this is actually destructive of civilization itself, because in today's world, science and technology only advance with capital. And if you don't build capital through savings, you're going to bring down these basic structures. So it's very serious.
You know, it's interesting, Alan, I saw Alan Greenspan interviewed on television, and he was asked about this new normal, this, you know, this slow growth economy, and Greenspan was very correct. He said, look, it's not about a new normal. The reason we have no economic growth is because we have no capital investment. We have no productivity. We have no savings. And he said, this is the problem, right? A lack of savings, a lack of capital investment, a lack of productivity. That's why we're having slow growth. But then he completely exonerated the Fed and said, well, the Fed didn't do it on their own. So wait a minute, why do we have no savings? Because of the Fed. And it's the Fed that's monetizing all the government debt. It's the Fed that's got interest rates at zero. How can you lament the fact that there's no savings, but then not castigate the Fed for having 0% rates? Because who's going to save when rates are zero? Who's going to save when the Fed is promising to destroy the value of whatever you happen to save? But Alan Greenspan doesn't want to criticize the Fed because he is the Fed. He wrote this playbook that they're all following, and that they're just taking it to an extreme level. But they're just expanding on what Greenspan put in motion, because he was the architect of this policy. But just it has to get more and more extreme in order to keep this thing going.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Mr. Schiff. Also, everyone, please, we very much appreciate if you give on Facebook a like to the Loyola Economics Club and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You post these.